Good evening, and welcome to the first edition of Ad Club's Vice and Versa. It's a series of online debates which will pick up topics which are being discussed for a while in the industry now. The topics are interesting, and there are enough points for and against those topics. I want to take this opportunity also to talk a little about Ad Club and the next few months. It's very clear that in the next few months there are very little chances of a physical gathering. So most of the events of the Ad Club would be internet based. This is one such initiative, and there will be more initiatives. But one very important announcement I want to make is that this year we want to dedicate a very significant part of our effort to bring out courses and academic programs which will help upskill our mid to senior level people. Mid to senior level people in the advertising and marketing industry would find some of these courses very useful. We are at different stages of dialogue with very famous universities across the country, and very soon we will be able to launch those courses. So watch this space. But this evening is not about that. This evening is about a very interesting topic of brand purpose and three very interesting people to debate and discuss the topic. Today's moderator is Agnello Dias, famously known as Aggie, and the speakers are Santosh Desai and Josy. I'm not going to waste your time trying to introduce them to you. I'm sure all of you know all of them very, very well. So without much ado, over to our moderator, Aggie. Thank you, Aggie.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Advertising Club's Vice and Versa. So this is a bit of a first for me and everybody involved in the way we are doing this, and also what I'm doing. I've never done it before. This is the first episode of Vice and Versa, and depending on how aggressively our participants take it, this could well be the last. So brace yourselves. But first, why the idea of a debate? Well, this is what I feel. I feel it's important because of the simple reason that as an industry, we manufacture a product whose evaluation is subjective. We're not making ball bearings or caps, which you can count and you say the larger guy wins. It's subjective because depending on who's evaluating it, it is good or bad. And I know you could say that it could be evaluated through sales, but we know that it's not just sales. Otherwise, life would be much more simpler. We all know that. Now, when our output itself is so subjective, by our own measurement systems, there's bound to be polarization. There's bound to be divisiveness. After all, as the great J. Krishnamurti said, thought divides. And in India, we are always different from the rest of the world, so we are comfortable with divisiveness, but not with conflict. Which brings us to a uniquely Indian trait. I call it the silent no. Let's face it. When we want to say yes, we say yes. And when we want to say no, we still say yes. The no in the Indian cultural context is always hidden, discreet, not brandished, felt, not spoken, internalized, never spelled out. And yet, we are a society that thrives on plurality of opinion, diversity of viewpoint, not to mention a dazzling array of swear words. It is this perpetual dichotomy that provides us an unending supply of cerebral adrenaline that keeps us going despite all the odds stacked against the possibility of us even functioning as a society. And for decades, the advertising and marketing community in India has kneaded and marinated the world's largest collection of emotional pulse points into an economy that keeps resurging in the face of all adversity. This heaving, throbbing underbelly of ambition, aspiration, and frankly, just the raw primal desire to live better, eat better, dress better, and just be better than better. It's not surprising that being locked in this perpetual tango with buffeting marketing forces inevitably casts us as an industry in the eye of the storm. With our points and counterpoints, our arguments and challenges, our beliefs and our opinions, and the uncanny ability to choose something productive out of every disagreement. The Advertising Club's Vice and Versa is hoping to harness this rare collection of diverse opinion in a series of constructive and thoughtfully curated debates. Why do we need this? We've got enough to worry about in any case. retrenchments, salary cuts. True. But what's also true is that the industry is made up of many sides, some on either face of the same coin, and that coin has an edge. We need to see both sides, argue about both sides, evaluate both sides. Why? Because ships don't sail far without a current, not in still waters. Kites don't fly high in a still wind. And it was only by churning the oceans that the gods could create nectar. That is the real power of an open debate, because all good things come out of conflict. And if there is no pushback, there's no push forward. So let's get started. Our topic for the first edition, one of my favorites, and which we discuss ad nauseum in our agency, and I'm sure in many agencies around the world. Brand purpose, responsible or opportunistic? On the one hand, we have the school of thought that says it's about time brands paid their dues to the society that built them and stand for something that can change consumers' lives, not just their habits. Sell less product, save more world. Brands have to stand for a cause, not a benefit. It's no longer about how they can change a young man's commute to work, or even his life, or his future, or even his world. It's about affecting the whole of humanity. In other words, it's time for some soul cleansing. On the other hand, we have a school of thought that says brand purpose is the new award pandemic. Pick a heart wrenching cause, create a clever product variant or a hashtag, put your heart and soul into the case study video, and pick up your trophy. It's creativity without relevance, communication that gets likes, not sales. So, heartstrings or purse strings, conscience pricking or sales tracking, affinity or behavior, for or against. Let's move on to our two participants. Santosh Desai, author, social commentator, and columnist, intellectual warrior par excellence. His columns in the Times of India have now become collector's pieces. A man who has his finger on the kind of pulse most people don't even know they have. And after spending many years in advertising, he quit as president of Mechanerics in India and is now managing director and CEO of Future Brands Limited, a best-selling author and on the board of Oxfam, amongst other illustrious institutions. Josy Paul, Chairman and Chief Creative Officer of BBDO India. Josy Paul and me have worked together. We once shared a room in an agency that's now become so big they had to change its name. Josy started BBDO India from the backseat of his car in 2008. In 2016, he was named Creative Agency Head of the Year by the Indian Advertising Association. And while we won normal Grand Prix back in the days, Josy went on to win Grand Prix of every different shape and color, glass, plutonium. I think he's probably going to win something with material made in India now. He and his partner Ajay Jala pioneered the idea of brand movements with the belief that India needs more acts and not ads. So, without further ado, let me welcome the two participants in today's polarizing debate: brand purpose, opportunistic or responsible. Welcome, Josy. Welcome, Santosh.
Thank you. Yeah. Would you like me to start?
So, Josy, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Yeah.
You obviously have a body of work to back up what you're going to say today.
Uh-huh.
And you got to watch your back, man, because there are people out there who are roaming around with daggers drawn for this whole school of thought in advertising. And before I go forward, let me tell everybody listening in that what this country needs to learn is the art of disagreement. And Josy and Santosh represent two different schools of thought, and there is no personal animosity involved. So let's take it from there and let's fight for the side we believe in. I think Josy, you should go first.
Okay, awesome, Maggie. Thank you. And Santosh, I love you, man. So let's go for it. So I'll start with a case for brand purpose. Let me start with a perspective, okay? And this is my truth. Brand purpose for me is very personal. It's about where you are coming from as a person, as an individual. Let me explain. In the late 80s, I was very inspired by an ad that I saw in one of the communication arts magazine that used to come to our table. It was one of the first ads for Nike. And I still remember every word of that ad. I remember that image as well, a golden sort of morning, a distant sort of road. I can see a lonely runner, and it says, they don't let you into their schools. They don't let you into their neighborhoods. They don't let you into their clubs. But the road is wide open. Just do it. I mean, we know who they were talking to. And that struggle and battle is still on. But what a brilliant ad. It had such a profound impact on me because I saw in it my guru. It wasn't about advertising as I knew it, and that's what affected me. And then immediately after that, I began to see the Cadbury's Dairy Milk ad, which came in 92. The lady dancing in wild abandon, like no one is watching. And it sang of returning to your childhood in your own fun way. The brand was liberating and legitimizing our inner child. We've all so moved. Then there was Amara Bajaj, and that spoke of the India we were all so proud of, a new surge of nationalism. It really felt good to be in advertising when I saw these three, distinct influences in my life. I thought that there was something bigger in these words that really appealed to me. These were the early influences, I feel, of brand purpose. And I realized I was that kind of guy. I was attracted to this kind of deeper messaging. So in a way, it was also resonating with me as a human being. In April 2000, I made a presentation to the senior creative people in Lintas. And I shared 30 pieces of work. And I said, let's pick which is a top 5. And I was surprised, and so was the team, that almost everyone picked the ones that had very powerful social message. And those were for big brands, not NGOs or non-profit organizations. It really got me thinking. It got all of us thinking. Then I started an agency called David in June of 2000. And the belief for that agency was that within every product or service, there is an inherent human cause or purpose, and it is our moral and creative duty to find it. And this is June 2000, okay? Even our agency name, David, stood for something. David versus Goliath. And the inherent David purpose was to discover the challenge in each of us so that we question everything, authority, dogma, discrimination, and the status quo, and find new ways for communication. And we did that. I remember our first campaign was for a magazine called Cricket Talk. And we urged India to let's get back to the game, because at that time there was this whole match fixing scandal and people were bringing the game down. And we created a campaign saying, let's get back to the game. I remember a second campaign in 2000, which was Open Your Mind for SR. It helped the company open doors for refinancing. It also was recognized worldwide and brought India's first one-show pencil. We never even knew about the one-show pencil at that time. Our third campaign was Lage Raho for Alpenliebe. It was for a candy brand, but there was something in it that was telling people, even with all that fun, that to keep at it. So all of these ideas came from the product offering. They didn't come from somewhere outside with no connection. It was within the product offering, within what the brand was trying to solve. And it felt meaningful, like you were not just selling goods, you were getting people to buy into something bigger. And the best part, the products and services were selling themselves. So around that time in 2005, the world saw a very interesting change, a new sound, Dove. Dove released this campaign for real beauty. And it was not an ad, it was a debate. And it sort of asked people to redefine the definition of beauty. And they challenged it. We had never seen something like that. But where was that coming from? That was coming from purpose. And then immediately after that, Persil came with Dirt is Good. In India, that was Surf Excel, and we've all seen it, Daag Achhe Hain, right? Brilliant. These were brands standing for something. And it made the brands instantly recognizable and tapped into a new source of energy in business communication. And like I've said before, you felt good to be in advertising. Around that time, we launched BBDO in India with the belief that India needs more acts, not ads. And this was inspired by an experience I had in front of the Taj, when I got over 500 people to chant with me on the anniversary of the terrorist attack. I'd never chanted in my life. And I was asked to do an ad on the subject, and I couldn't do an ad for a national wound. So I said, I've got to act, I've got to do something to purge that within me. And so I went in front of the Taj and began to chant when I didn't even know what it meant. And I got so many people to chant with me. And that's when I said, let's create acts, not ads. I remember Aggie's campaign immediately after that. Pepsi's changed the game. It was brand purpose at its best, imbued a youthful and unique Indian spirit to Pepsi, and India went on to win. And so these are many examples that tell us that there is a sort of sincerity to a lot of this work, which is coming from a deeper place. Allow me to talk a little bit about our own work. When we did education as insurance for Aviva, it was crazy. We did this thing called the Great Wall of Education in Delhi, and was a wall that was about 100 meters wide, 10 meters high. And we invited the people of Greater Delhi to come and give their old books. And along with, about 10 NGOs, we were separating the books so that it can go out to people who need them. And when I went to the event, I was blown because there were people out there who were teaching kids how to give. I saw a grandmother showing a kid what it means to give. I saw a man weeping and another woman with him, his wife, saying, this guy's never ever lent a book in his life, and here he is giving his collection. The energy around that was so powerful, and you realize the power of what you were doing. We did touch the pickle. That was so much more defiant, a strong action that created a platform for women to question period taboos. We did share the load, which went on to become the campaign of the year and got the most effectiveness campaign for 2 years in a row. These were all about action, all with purpose, and they all raised the bar for the brand. And I would like to think for the world. We wanted to be at the intersection of where artists and activists meet. It wasn't about aggression. It was just a sort of contribution. Why were we doing this? We were doing this because unique selling proposition is giving way to unique point of view.
Only 30 seconds.
Yeah. USP is giving way to UPV. The nature of media is getting fragmented. And when media gets fragmented, you've got to stand for something and create action. And that something and action becomes the glue that brings the fragmented media together. And it creates followers, it creates volunteers, partners, ambassadors. We remember, when you do share the load, there are so many people who come forward and say, we want to be your partner. And we don't even think about these guys, but they come because they want to be a volunteer. We've seen effectiveness, right? I spoke about the most effective campaign in the world. Most importantly, it affects internal culture. We've seen how people within the company feel good about what they do. I get letters from people saying, thank you for doing this. We feel like coming to work, from these companies, and letters coming from around the world. In a way, this gives you meaning and relevance in today's sort of complicated life. And you move from creating desire to inspire. And finally, you stand for something. Because if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And of course, for me, it feels good to be in advertising.
Okay, so Josy, I have 4 words for you. Give me a break. Because I think if one were to draw a pattern, one could prove almost anything with any theory on earth. So if I were to ask you, for example, the primary job of marketing, communication, or advertising was to build sales for a client, almost every one of these you would or anyone would prove that actually they did raise the benchmark or move the needle on clients, right? Because they also qualify very proudly for those. But there is a school of thought that out there which says if eventually anything you're doing is in order to try and sell the product, whether it is whether dolphins should be breastfeeding their little ones, or whether sari should be draped around robots, isn't it the lowest form of selling? Because if you're manipulating what people perceive as genuine social cause and actually doing it in order to increase sales of a product, isn't that in any way the lowest form of selling then? Because at least conventional advertising is pretty open about the fact that they're out to sell, they're out to convince, they're out to persuade, they're out to entertain. If you like any of that, please put your money up and buy our product because you're buying into us. But if you actually take brand purpose at its worst, and I'm sorry to say I've been in enough award shows now where the entire show is actually a public service show in every category. In most cases it's nothing more than brand placement. You could go up the Himalayas to save Neolithic rocks, and while doing that, if you pick up a soft drink, it's a soft drink ad. While doing that, if you wear a certain pair of shoes, it's that shoe ad. While doing that, if you chew gum, it's that gum ad. Because brand purpose, just there are brands that are not even known by people. They are 1 year old and they are being pulled by this so-called notion that every brand should have a purpose into spending serious money on probably creating what is called now creating awareness about XYZ cause. But our primary job, why clients hire us, is actually to increase sales. And if they do increase sales, then maybe it is the lowest form of selling.
Do you want me to respond? Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's why I started by saying true brand purpose is actually personal. When you look at what REI did for Opt Outside, REI is one of the biggest chains for outdoor goods in the US. And on the day of the largest sales, so we're talking about sales, right? On the day when America buys the most, talking sales, they shut their shops. They said, we believe in standing for being outside. So on the day when everyone's going to crowd the stores, it's a holiday, national holiday, we shut our stores because we want to stand for what we believe in. Because we 16 people who started this company believe in the great outdoors. That's why we started this. So we close our shops and we tell everyone, this is what we're doing to show you we believe in what we do. It's amazing, right? Where does that come from? Is that sales? Is that manipulation? It's just somebody saying, I will show you in this world where there are people who are doing things for the sake of it. I'll show you what it really means. That's why I'm saying that true brand purpose all depends on where you are coming from. And you can sense it. You can sense a lie and you can sense a truth. People are not fools. You can tell that. Today you can say, I love the Tatas because I can feel it, right? There's something embedded in their DNA and our residents that tells us that. We can't just say no. Like just because everything is colored doesn't make something black,
So if you were to be asked by a client, as usual, clients will ask you to say the bottom line is to increase sales.
Yeah.
You tell a client, for example, which ideally you should, if this is your stance, that this is what the brand should do, and I know what it will do for this cause, but I do not know what it will do for your sales. Or would you not tell him that?
No, we wouldn't tell them that because what we normally do is we get into a sort of thing called emotional data. We have a whole process where we get to the truth of the brand through where the people are interacting with that brand. And often it goes beyond the brand, it goes into the category. And there are a lot of category truths that are not been sort of uncovered. And we are like archaeologists. We go to the ocean floor of that. And over there, you find things that are very, very universal. It cuts across the world. We don't know what it is. So we can't tell the client, do this. If we find it, we'll present it. If we don't, then we have to do it some other way. But we try and go to the bottom of the ocean of that emotion and relationship with that category.
But in the way it's practiced right now with the younger creative generation, when we started, we were taught and was hammered into our heads that you massaged and researched the product inside out, the factory where it's made, how it's
Yeah.
consumed. All our deep diving and burrowing was into the product.
Yeah.
Whereas today, what we've started is, a habit where the moment a younger guy gets a brief, he goes and starts scanning the news and the current affairs to see what's the most glamorous, the most unique, the most unusual cause he can pick up and latch his brand onto it, because the race is not to find a new way of selling a product and not to find a new product to make. The race is to find a new cause. Oh, nobody's thought of the fact that trees breathe at night, and maybe if you put a thread around a tree, it's suffocating the tree. I'm just making things to illustrate the point. But for the entire young creative generation, isn't it a completely wrong way of approaching a brief?
So maybe then we've not shared the truth fully. Maybe all people are seeing is the veneer and assuming that is the truth. I think where we're coming from, or where I'm coming from, is not that. Because we go to the genuine bottom, and that's why we'll see our work. Our work speaks for itself. We'd love to ask anyone to challenge our work and its authenticity. And that for us is our only sort of evidence. There is no theory for us in this, because you're right. It can be bent in any way for anybody who's a cynic,
Okay. Thanks, Josy. I think it was a good push and throw, but I'll come back to you. I'd like to move on to Santosh, which is the opposite end of the spectrum. Santosh, everybody is saying capitalism is dead. How much are you going to suck out of the world by selling stuff? Start giving back. I'd like you to go on your piece.
Yeah, thanks, Aggie, and thank you, Josy. That was very sweet. I'm afraid what I'm going to say is not going to be very sweet, but let me begin, in the same spirit of love that you began with, and then let me argue a little bit, for what you were arguing for. I mean, surely at one level, brand purpose is a good thing, right? I mean, how can it be a bad thing? At long last, we have businesses talking about social responsibility. They are talking about looking beyond profit. There's something good is being attempted. I mean, should we not be encouraging this? Should we be copying critics, always looking for something to sort of criticize and feel unhappy about? What is the problem here? I mean, why is this a problem at all? The problem here, in my view, is not the fact that brands are becoming socially responsible or they want to do good things. The problem is the fact that they're asserting that the primary reason for their existence is to do better for humanity, to do better for the world. It is the reason, and the kind of articulation you come across is that we get out of bed in order to do this. It is the passion that drives us beyond profits. So what is being presented to the world is the idea that it is brands that have this wonderful vision of the world, and that is their primary driver. That is the reason for their existence. This sits above everything else, the primary purpose why they are here. And in a sense, this reminds me, of an earlier era of super claims. There was this whole phase that I think, that everyone went through, where we had these kind of claims, which was these hard guaranteed to work in 15 minutes, remove wrinkles in 3 weeks, make your child grow by 21%, that kind of a claim. Dodgy claims with asterisks that kind of were sort of giving disclaimers all the time. To my mind, this is the equivalent of that kind of a dodgy overclaim, where you take a kernel of truth, a token activity that you are engaging in, a little act, to use your words, that you perform, and blow it up as being the central purpose of your existence. And to me, this is of nothing but dishonest exaggeration. Brands now are therefore presenting themselves as saving the world in a variety of ways. Why now? Why are suddenly brands doing this? And the answer is simple. Because there is a belief that there is a new generation of consumers that values this, that is looking, is actually asking us, is looking askance at consumption, and is looking beyond consumption. So what do brands do? What do they pull out? They pull out concern. And they ask to be bought, not for any other reason, but because their heart bleeds for us, everyone that they are catering to. And that becomes a reason why we must look at them. To my mind, this way of looking at brand purpose is not only opportunistic, it is hypocritical. It can be banal and boring, and a whole sense of sameness that pervades all these earnest kind of the communications that we see, extreme form of token virtue signaling, and eventually this does not hold because this is not the truth. Brands do not exist for this reason. It's a posture. And to my mind, this is dangerous not just for society, but also for the brands in question. What makes this opportunistic? At its heart, you cannot make a purpose. Either you have it or you don't. I mean, that's the fundamental idea of purpose. You begin with purpose. And there are a handful of brands that do have purpose. Josy mentioned the Tatas, and I would agree with him on that. That was an organization founded on a certain vision of what it was to be an enterprise. They, created policies way ahead of their time. They did things that they didn't need to do. They spent money that they didn't need to spend. That is genuine purpose. There are a handful of brands even today that do that. But for the vast bulk of brands, including the ones that, a lot of the brands that you have shared, brand purpose is something that they have discovered late in life, something that they have tacked on to themselves in order to today be relevant in a changing consumer space. And it's interesting that a lot of these brands today are doing the exact opposite, of what they have done for decades. These are the brands that have dismantled the self-esteem of women. You're too fat, you're too thin, your hair is not shiny enough, your skin doesn't glow, you're too dark. Systematically, these are the brands that have done that. They have encouraged rampant overconsumption, reinforced all kinds of stereotypes, made fun of all human vulnerabilities. This is what over the years these brands have done, and now suddenly these are the paragons of virtue. Lecturing to us, share the load. They are lecturing now to us as to how we should behave, having suddenly discovered this noble side to themselves. You cannot get away from the fact that once you start putting yourself on a pedestal, people will ask difficult questions. How can you have Dove and how can you have Fair and Lovely coming from the same stable? However powerful Dove is, how do you explain? And you can do any fancy footwork that you like. You can try and reframe Fair and Lovely as much as you like. But that is the truth. And the question is a legitimate question. Many other signs of hypocrisy. Gillette for years has created a certain archetype of masculinity, decides one fine day to a woke ad which says call out toxic masculinity, and hello, that's a solution to all their problems. Take a brand like J&J, deeply trusted. And for it to pay $4.7 billion or to be awarded, to be fined $4.7 billion for something wrong, something deeply wrong with a talcum powder. What does it say? How do you balance and how do you, on the one hand, and they have a wonderfully crafted brand purpose statement, which talks about, changing the trajectory of health for all humanity. How do you reconcile the two? Even, the truth is, this is what happens when you start asking, you have to ask hard questions. The same company that talks about watch the load, share the load, was ranked the 7th worst employer in terms of paid family leave policies, which is, the maternity leave policies and the like. Perhaps you could start by sharing the load of your employees. See, the other problem, and the other reason for the hypocrisy is that if you really believed all this, you would be measuring yourself on this. If you don't have the metrics to say, am I actually raising the self-esteem of women? How many times have you been called into a meeting? Have I been called into a meeting saying, hey guys, we don't seem to be raising the self-esteem of women enough. We've been called 100 times on this is not moving enough. What really moves an organization is what creates crises. If you're not measuring this, you are not moved by this. So, and if, say, for instance, Unilever, which is making perhaps a very well-intentioned effort to move towards purpose, if it talks about making commonplace lives lived sustainably, perhaps it can begin by setting itself goals for reducing consumption. I mean, on the other hand, the case it makes for brand purpose is the fact that brands that was part of their sustainable living package grew 69% faster than the other brands. Terrific. But how does it sit with creating sustainable living? If every company in the world was to try and get that kind of a growth rate, how do you reconcile this lofty goal of sustainable living with actively promoting unsustainable consumption. Even if for the sake of argument one agrees that the intentions are noble here, let's trust these intentions. Let's go along with these intentions. The problem is a structural one. The ecosystem in which these brands are embedded does not value. It places value, the stock market, the investing community, they place value somewhere else. This is a fundamental contradiction. You can talk about purpose all you like, but you will be allowed to do it only till such time as you deliver results. The day you don't, all this talk of belief bubbling in from inside falls by the wayside. Because at that time, you will switch gears and you will start doing something else because you are located in an ecosystem that will not allow you otherwise. So perhaps before making these self-important claims about the world, perhaps organization could begin with something much more real, something much more basic. Pay your taxes fully. Don't try and escape tax. Look after your employees well. Avoid contract labor to circumvent regulation. Not sack people the moment there is a slight downturn. Not make false claims in advertising. The number of false claims that these kind of companies, if you look at the ASCII sort of a roster over the years, the number of false claims that actually come from these very high-minded sort of companies is extremely large. How do you again reconcile that? See, overall, what has happened is that we have ceded far too much space to corporations. And what is happening now is that now we are allowing them to lecture us on creating better world. And I'm not saying that corporations are not doing, that they're doing everything that they do is bad, or that the idea of a corporation or brands is fundamentally evil. Far from it. This is a question of overextending yourself. This is a question of making claims that are not sustainable. This is dishonesty. And this is posturing. It is puffery. And therefore it needs to be called out. And the worst part about it is, and every time, the awards kind of thing, comes up, that is scavenging on the misery of others. I mean, there is nothing more than that. It is simply finding something to feed off on. And to my mind, that should be deeply distressing for anybody to sort of have to experience that. I will end, by not making arguments or not sort of, marshalling facts, but saying let's all, among all the, if we were to add all the people who are listening to this and viewing this, we would have like many sort of years of experience of meetings. Let's look back into our own organizations. Let's look back into all the meetings, all the discussions we have had. How many times have we come and truly felt that our heart was really about society, we were thinking about humanity, we were thinking about society. How many times have we really been asked hard questions about those kind of issues as against everything else? The problem is that brand purpose right now is a mask. And it is a vastly inflated kind of a claim that is being made by brands. I think we know better. Who are we kidding? Who are we kidding when we profess that we are here to save the world? I think we need to look beyond that.
So, Santosh, you exceeded, but I let you go because you were in the flow. But simple question to you. You seem to divide the world between black and white. If you have not done anything wrong or right, only then can you indulge. But we all know that the world is gray, right? So do you think that if somebody is willing to do something good in one part of his ecosystem or his life as a brand, but there are other parts which, due to various other compulsions in the world that we live in, he's not able to do it, he should not even make a start? What should companies do? Roll over and die and live evil forever?
That's a fair point.
They're trying to do the best they can. This is a start. Maybe they'll do more. And maybe that purpose campaign, maybe Share the Load, will become the ethos of the company. But you're saying either they start by revamping the company and restart it again, or they don't do anything at all.
No, I'm not making that point. I'm making the point, don't claim it. I mean, don't try and use it as a marketing peg. Get it right. I mean, it's in our lives. We don't always announce everything good that we do. This idea that something good is worth doing only if you can display that. I mean, that's a marketing idea. In a real world, that's not how it works, right? If you want to do something good, do it by all means. You do it, and particularly if you claim that I'm doing it because I believe in it, not because it works for me, then by all means do it. What is the need to go on a pedestal? What is the need to lecture down to others? What is the need for that to be the central premise of everything that you are saying? So I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you up to the point that brands should be doing more. There should be a fundamental difference in the way that they see their interaction with society. But this need for that to be the reason why you should look at me, why you should buy me, once you do that, particularly in today's world, you are asking to be evaluated. You are asking for that scrutiny. And that is the point. I mean, I didn't get the chance to amplify when I said it is dangerous for brands themselves. You are setting yourself up to be asked the kind of questions that you were not being asked earlier, simply because you claim and you profess something which you cannot deliver.
But Santosh, in the past, when we did, I mean, for the sake of this discussion, let's call it conventional selling. We went below the belt several times. We told parents that their kids are not good enough. We told kids their fathers are not good enough. We planted seeds of discord emotionally in families in order to swing their way towards our brand. So there was no rule or ethic then in terms of what we do in order to get people to buy. So one would argue that this is just the new way. Somebody's found a new way of doing it. And what's wrong with it? Who said that, up to a point, manipulating feelings and emotions is allowed, and beyond that point, it's not?
See, you've just given a textbook definition of opportunistic. I mean, your argument, your question is basically saying, so we are opportunistic. But that's the proposition, right? That's the proposition I'm trying to establish, that yes, this is opportunistic. I mean, the fact, that's all it is. I mean, that is exactly what it is. Yesterday we were doing that, today we are doing this. That was one form of manipulation, this is another form. Your question is your answer.
So are you saying advertising was always opportunistic anyway?
Of course. By its very definition, it was. See, look, the fact is that was the whole point, right? You look for hooks. You look for pegs which allow you to establish some sort of a relationship with the consumer. They lie in human motivations of all kinds, right? The change that has happened now, right, is the fact that you are now operating at a much. See, the problem is you're not just merely happy, sort of, making an occasional kind of a foray into sensitive human emotions. You are claiming. I mean, your claim is the fact that I will raise women's self-esteem. I mean, it's a staggering. Once you say something like that, I will create sustainable living. These are not small claims, and for humanity. Why should you make a claim like this? I mean, on what is the need for you to step out of what you are naturally good at, to take on this mantle of trying to save the world? It's precisely because of that you get asked. Don't say that. You don't get, you will still get asked questions, but you don't set yourself. Here it is perfectly legitimate to ask these kind of questions because you are setting yourself up.
So if you say advertise, I mean, we both agreed to a certain extent that advertising was, a shade of opportunistic anyway. Are you saying what gets you so riled up about this new all-encompassing fad called brand purpose is the fact that it's now going out and claiming it to a much more extreme degree or a greater degree, and earlier was not that much?
Yes, and also I think what it does is that, what is the consequent effect of this is that it gives, big brands a voice in areas that they did not have a voice in. Today, when we talk about improving society or social change today at a platform like Davos, we have now these brands lecturing to us about how to improve, the lot of humanity. And my point is that apart from the problems within the sphere of marketing, this is a larger societal issue when we see this kind of space to brands that are essentially, engaging in, an enactment of purpose for most part. And to me, this is not just something that is wrong with marketing, but it's dangerous in a larger sense.
So I'd like to ask Josy, because it's now rebuttal time, and both of you get a chance to rebut what the other person has said. You could, of course, use the time to further what you said earlier, but I think I have a feeling Josy has a lot to rebut, going by what Santosh said, and he may change his plans of continuing where he took off and actually come back at what he feels about what Santosh said. So, Josy,
No, I made a few points as you guys had discussed, and firstly, I must say that I'm a bit of an optimist, not an opportunist. Yeah, so that's the first point, and so I see it like Neil Armstrong said: one small step for brand, a giant leap for brand kind. Yeah, and I think that the point you made, Aggie, about the seed. I think when brands sow that seed, they have to live it. You know, you can't sow the seed and run away because it was your seed. And so it's a start. And that first step is what makes me an optimist. So I come from that sort of point of view because I've seen that. I've seen how cultures have changed because somebody sowed a seed in that company. And for me, that gives me hope. I remember a pitch where we was so bad that in the pitch we challenged the client and we said, why does India need another insurance company when what we need is insurance, what we need is education. Every mother and father wants their little girl to be educated. You want to offer insurance? For us, education is insurance. I don't think we want to work on this brand. And we left. I don't know what happened to us in that meeting. We really stood for what we believed in. But you won't believe what happened. A week later, we got a call from the marketing chief saying, we love what you feel and we'd like to look at our world again. And then they gave us the business with this thought of education as insurance. They changed many of their plans to become more child plans, which are related to education. They created the Great Wall of Education as part of their commitment. Now, you may say that is a recognition of an idea that could lead to manipulation. But to me, we know where those guys were coming from. You can read a person when that person's trying to use you, you know. And sure enough, these people have gone on to do some amazing things on their own after that. So, yeah, so for me, I am an optimist. And while I understand where, you know, Santosh is coming from, and I think in a way, Santosh also has a brand purpose in him as a man who fights against anything that he challenges. So that is your brand purpose, my friend.
Yeah, I have a question. A lot of the examples you give are anecdotal about you or your agency. And I think what Santosh is talking about when he mentioned Tata's is actually, if there is purpose in a brand, you'll already see it, or a little bit of digging and it'll be there. But what he's talking about is this whole new way of working, which is people herring off in various directions, just looking for purpose, even where there is none. And if there is none, the pressure so much on the system now, because every brand seems to have a purpose, is that if there is none, you create one. At least create one for the sake of a campaign. I think that's what he's.
Yeah, but there will be a correction, right? This is all early days, just like early days of advertising. This is early days of this wanting to jump into the same sort of, gravy train. But it won't work for everyone because they will be found out, and the truth will live, and the right guys who live it will shine. That'll come through. So in the early days, you can't say no to things. You got to give it a chance, And so I think what we're struggling with is what has happened in the last 5 to 6 years. And we're assuming that is the world. That is just the early days.
So I think one of the things that troubles the other school of thought is that we've had creative fads in the past, right? We had a few years where humor was a very, very big, when emotion was very big. Jingles, of course, that's how, the inception of advertising, where jingles almost were in every second ad. But never before has there been what we would call a style of creativity that has been so all-encompassing that the entire industry and entire awards of 600 ads, everything is now public service for tires and public service for automotive and public service for telecom and public service for FMCGs. So it's beginning to look wrong. Just I mean, I've been in award shows when the results come up with, say, so many likes and so many hits and so much free PR, people yawn and fall back. So I think that's the worry, that it's probably being misused more than it's being used well. And when you cite anecdotal evidence in your agency of it being used well, I think it could present a wrong picture that it's all good and it's really saving the world. Because I call it, why is the whole world saving the whole world from the whole world? Now, what has gone wrong suddenly? Were we always this bad and never knew it? Have we suddenly become so bad now? And have brands suddenly discovered a social philanthropic bone in their collective global selves? So these are questions we ask ourselves, because when you talk about purpose, maybe you talk about it very loftily and well, but if you look at the rank and file of creative in all agencies, it's not spoken about in the same manner. It's just spoken about as, we used to earlier search the black book and earlier look at ads. Now we just look at the papers to find out, what is the worst case scenario that you can find somebody in such a pathetic situation that it's going to look good on my brand purpose and attach a brand purpose to it. I mean, a cola that encourages people to, take a chance with life is different from, like you did yourself, a detergent sold at home. So I think that's what he's saying. But Santosh, do you have a rebuttal to Josy's rebuttal? Because he seemed to have a point when he's saying that it's just early days. This is how all movements start. But eventually it's going to become real and genuine. And you can't take a few bad pennies and say, the whole thing is wrong.
Well, I mean, it's possible to sympathize with that view, except for the fact that, if it is early days, then your claim should be, consonant with the fact that it's early days. Show a little humility. Yeah. Show, if you are starting out, you can't have it both ways. You can't be seen from day one to be saving the world and then plead that, but it's just, early days. It's just 5 years since we started, claiming these fantastic things. So please be gentle on us, be kind. You can't say that, right? Either. So by all means, don't make these claims. By all means, you have that, and you always have that, that option. And to my mind, this, and also, if the evidence such as it is that Josy is marshalling is like you said, anecdotal. These are sweet little stories. And I have absolutely no doubt about the purity of the intent that he personally may have. But that's just, that is meaningless. I'm sorry. Individual small sweet stories or one event there, they don't sit and they don't explain the scale of the ambition that brands are professing. To me, that is the mismatch. But otherwise, this is all good stuff. This is sweet. This is nice. It's by all, and the fact, the point that Aggie you made, this has become the industry standard. But this is, and how can you not feel aggrieved or upset about this giant kind of, where everybody is showing phony concern? You see, if it was a small movement, if it is nascent stages, there are a few people doing it. Some are getting it right, some are getting it wrong. But this is not the description that is fair today. Everybody is doing this. That's the point you have been making, Aggie. Everybody is doing this, right? This has become the new industry standard without the responsibility of doing anything about it, in a real sense.
So what you're actually saying is, we're taking expressing great concern about is the fact that it's now become systemic. It's almost like it's become bigger than the industry itself. Like this, the industry is now this industry. It's not the advertising industry anymore. But I think when Josy points out these small green grass shoots of hope in this, what is concerning for me in what Josy says is, and I'm going to ask Josy this point blank. If you get a brief, any kind of brief, okay, not even for an existing well-known brand, but say a brand that's just been launched in the market, are you saying that you will only do it if you find some kind of tension point in society which will allow you to resonate with the brand and do that? Or is there no room for normal persuasive advertising anymore in your book?
No, actually, it's diverse. Yeah, it's quite wide open, right? I mean, I've got O in my name, yeah, Josy. It's O for open. So, sorry, stupid one, bad one. But yeah, I mean,
These are the
it's
kind
not
of
that you start by saying this is it. We're only going to do a cause and we're only going to do a purpose. It's not all that, right? I mean, that's not where we begin. Sometimes you end with that when you sort of sense it, that this thing has it and can possibly offer it in a meaningful way. So you don't start by saying, to answer your question, this is it. There is no this is it.
But then, why do you feel that all the major recognition for most work around the world in recent years, and I'm calling out recognition in the form of awards, Santosh, only because that's the one that gets played out as representative of our industry, right? Nobody takes a normal hardworking ad and says this is representative of advertising. But all of this seems to only fall, and particularly with the foreign audience who's not used to the intricacies and the nuances that make up India, seem to fall within this bucket. I think it's now almost 99% of all the work that actually wins from India or gets spotlighted, not even wins from India, is this kind of work. There's no proper brand work anymore, at least that gets spotlighted. So are we then as an industry losing the skills and the crafts that allowed us to make normal advertising? Because all our energy, and it's obviously a big thrust from the top, because a lot of captains of industry like you believe in this, is actually focusing on getting the rank and file to only do this.
Just there are two parts to this question. One is the awards thing and the other is why is it happening? About the awards thing, again, I'll have to get anecdotal. I'm sorry. When we did Share the Load and we did Touch the Pickle and it won big in Cannes and it won the Grand Prix and everything, we were not even in Cannes. We didn't even expect any sort of winning. We were lying in bed, and I was lying in bed in Delhi after some work. So just to put that at rest, you didn't do it because of that. Two is about why is it happening? I think there is a generational sort of need to find meaning, perhaps. And it's almost like a reaction to the past. It's a reaction to the work of the past. And these are all generational things. And so you see this rise. And then somebody did it and somebody did it well. And so everyone follows. It's something like that, I feel. Because I find it very difficult to generalize. I look at the specific because the specifics give me the truth. Everything else is judgment. And I'm too scared to judge too soon because that's like too broad.
Okay, so Santosh, I have a question for you actually. On behalf of Josy, and particularly with your pedigreed background in strategy planning and advertising, do you think what we used to call the great insight or the great landing strategy for creative takeoff, we're just done with it because there don't seem to be any more insights anymore? There's no new strategy coming out anymore. Everything has been done before, so there's no real fresh insight? Or you think it's an easy way out for planners, and planners are a part of this game with creative, or it's just over, that phase is over? It's like the before after ads came and then they were over, and the jingles came and then they were over, and this is the end of super classical human insight as we knew it, and we are probably going to become the woke industry.
No, I absolutely don't think that. I think, as long as people, evolve, people change, and, there are new currents that take place in terms of, there are some, a lot of motivations are timeless. It's not that 20 years ago, there were new motivations in that sense. Basic human motivations don't change. They just wear different clothes. They just have different contexts. They have different shades of meaning. And I think that's exactly what is happening even today. So to believe that somehow we have run out of insights and now the only thing we can do is to profess, love for humanity, I don't think is true. And that being said, I would just point to the underlying mental model behind your question. That the problem with that question, to my mind, is that it still locates brand purpose in claims and in what agencies do. Brand purpose does not begin with agencies. There has nothing to do with agencies. Brand purpose is real only if it comes from brand organizations. Agencies they may be partners, but they cannot have a role because brands have to believe that, have to act that, and advertising is a tiny part of its whole repertoire of actions. So to my mind, the problem whenever we locate this discussion in advertising, that fundamentally underlines the problem with a concept like brand purpose, that we conflate it with saying stuff to people. Whereas the whole point is, it is about organizational behavior in the deepest possible sense. It is an organizational worldview. It is the people that you hire. It is the decisions that you make, the choices that you make. Advertising is one of them. And this, to my mind, is just pointing and underlining that issue.
So just to add to that, I mean, I would like to say that, when we say and when we read in some great books, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. I think there is a seed, when you say that, and I said it before, when you say it, it's in the air. And now you got to stand by it, Santosh. So when somebody says it, whether it's for manipulation or whatever, he said it or she said it or the organization has said it. And now they have to back it. And that's the start. So you got to start somewhere, right? Otherwise, if we come purely with this form of cynicism, then where do we begin?
Santosh, I think to say something to that thing.
No, I'm just saying that, that's not, I mean, I wish it were that simple. I wish it was the fact that I have spoken, and therefore, because you're not, it's not just about you, right? It's not just about an individual. It's not just about a campaign. It is about, if say a large organization has to actually deliver to this, so many things have to change. So I mean, it's to me, that's glib at, to describe it badly, naive to describe it somewhat kindly, as a perspective to believe that, once we have spoken, I mean, that way, advertising said all kinds of things, so let's not kid ourselves there. I think that would be kidding ourselves to believe that our word, has the potency to convert itself into a whole sort of a ecosystem of actions. I suspect that's not true.
Okay. So there's a question for Josy, which I had, which is, do you think, earlier communication was supposed to present the product or highlight the product or, purvey the product in a manner that would engage with consumers? And do you think that has stopped now, and now communication is supposed to create a product, because the actual product is there, and what we go and do with this kind of thinking is actually create a whole new amorphous abstract product and slap it onto the real product and put it out. So actually, when we get a brief, we start from creating a product and not communicating what the product is about.
Yeah, that's a great question, because if the product has a true differentiation that needs to be quickly sort of leveraged, then we must do it, because that's very simple and it's straightforward. And a lot of startups have that, right? When we work with startups, they have a new point of view with a new product, in which case you don't have to do all this because the idea itself is so fresh. But there are products which are parity, products where there is no point of differentiation. And that's what I said, the unique selling proposition does not exist for a lot of products. And so you got to go to a unique point of view. And often that tends to translate into something that is deeper and, related to where people are coming from, society is coming from.
So I think our time is up. I mean, not up, but actually we got to move to the next segment, which is the wrap up. And each of you will get 90 seconds. Josy, if you were to create a 90-second ad, that's a lot for a commercial for the Brand Cause Society of India. Go for it. And you can go for Santosh as well.
Okay, so for me, I mean, my 90-second is not, it's just to say that when you string together a lot of the work we do, you will find a constitution developing. In a way, it's like us, we've got a secret agenda. We're creating it's like a parable. It's like a parallel world that we're trying to create with the values that we want, to live, values in a world that we want to live in. We're creating a world that we want to live in. So that is our secret agenda. And that is what we're trying to do. So it's a world where it's personal. I wish, it's an I wish world. It's a Pied Piper's world. I want to take you to that world. And that's what we're trying to do with this. I will take you to a world where you can touch the pickle, where you can share the load, where nobody will judge you, where education is insurance. It's that. It's like when you string the work, that where your mind is open and you can see more because of Versailles glass. There is a reason for this. It's not just coming from some, here's a cool new thing. It's been always there. I've always wanted this. I got into advertising because of this. And so, I mean, it's what I'm here for. I'm not asking the world to do it. It's what drives me. It's what drives me. That's all I can say.
Yeah, Josy, you increasingly come from a really deep personal space, and I'm sure it is deeply meaningful to you. I think what we are all baffled and puzzled and probably even hassled by is that it suddenly seems to have become a deeply personal space, or posturing as a deeply personal space for the entire creative communication industry. And I think that's the point of this debate. But I'll give it to Santosh for his wrapping up 90-second headlining of whatever he would like to say for this.
In some ways, I think, Josy's closing to my mind, it just underlines the fact that, these are sporadic. I mean, to me, these are, anecdotal, sporadic token actions, and they have their place and they have their importance. But the problem is that what brands are professing is way beyond this. They are actually donning a mantle that is far too large for it to sit with the kind of case that Josy is making. And in a personal sense and in a limited sense, that's a great case to make. But we are talking about a much larger question. We are talking about the idea of brand purpose. Globally, whether that's an idea that is genuinely responsible or only opportunistic. Is it hypocritical? And my argument is the fact that at this stage, given what brands are doing today, given what brands can do today, given the fact that they are located inside, and locked inside and surrounded by a financial ecosystem that makes certain demands of them, it is for brands to pretend that they can deliver all that they are promising is nothing but a lie. And if they were not to be so ambitious, if they were to begin small, not make claims in a hurry, build, you could argue that they would eventually get to a point that there would be change. And to echo what Josy said, they could be, but unfortunately brands are not waiting for that. Unfortunately, brands have decided that this is just simply the new proposition that they have. This is, yesterday you sold it in one way. This is the new proposition. Unfortunately, it involves beliefs. They are saying that it's my belief at work here, and they are manipulating, therefore, human emotions and vulnerabilities at a much higher level and a much grander scale than they ever have before. To me, that is unacceptable.
Okay, so thank you both. I think there are some questions that are coming for Santosh from Nibu Chazian. Hi Santosh, is brand purpose more deep-rooted if it's the culture of an organization? Are brand purpose and culture intertwined?
Absolutely. I mean, once you were to adopt an overriding brand purpose and you were to say that is really what I'm fundamentally all about, then unless it is aligned with organizational culture, unless it is aligned with the kind of people you populate the organization with and their personal worldviews, unless there is an alignment of all of these, it becomes virtually impossible for an organization in its every action to continue to deliver to the brand purpose. So if the brand purpose is serious and it's real, then it necessarily has to be aligned with and drive a culture. They cannot be two different pieces.
So the next question is for you again, Santosh. Saloni Sisodia. Would you say the problem is with the understanding of consumers? Consumers don't care about purpose, but we think they do.
That's a possible hypothesis that the consumers, and certainly there are parts of the world where consumption has evolved to a point where there is a certain staling of the idea of consumption, and therefore there is a reaction to consumption that may not necessarily hold across all parts of the world. So I think the easy assumption that being purposeful is by itself enough as a story or as a compelling kind of a reason why people should look at you is not necessarily a universal idea. And I think that's a fair question to ask as to whether it necessarily translates across context. It is dependent on the specifics of a consumption context and the degree to which consumers are looking beyond it.
So Deepali Nair for Josy. Advertising does have a role to play to communicate the brand purpose. However, is brand purpose the same as the purpose which lifts human spirits?
But they're both purposeful. The purpose that lifts human spirit is the purpose as well, right? So I would say, yeah, it's not the same, but they're coming from the same place. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good differentiation, but they're both coming from the same place.
And to Santosh from Nandini, do you think brand purpose is connected to the compulsory CSR budget stipulated by the government?
Well, that's an Indian, that's an Indian kind of a peculiarity, if you may. So I think while but this is a global movement. This is a global kind of a trend that we are seeing. So I think, and the truth about this so-called CSR allocation is the fact that certainly most organizations have really not seen much. I mean, NGOs were all delighted that they were going to get a whole new source of funding. It hasn't happened. So in any case, I think this is a global kind of a trend. So I'm not sure the Indian kind of a law has much to do with it.
And for Josy, despite having so many cause-based advertising, people don't remember these ads. Is it because consumers don't really connect with them? I think
in case
I would have said when it fails, then you neither engage with people normally, nor do you not has brand purpose works. So it's a big double failure. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it'll have to be more specific, right? Like when the question is important, but it'd be good to know which ads, because to the client, many of these have worked for them, but maybe this has not worked for some of the people. So it'll be good to get more specific.
And to Santosh, I think the last one from Dilip Ashok. Given a choice, is it possible for a fundamentally commercial organization to ever have a brand purpose?
It's a good question, but I think there are instances where if it is embedded and it is genuinely the reason why you're in business, and if you have really thought of business as a way of expressing that brand purpose. It doesn't happen very often, but why not? I mean, eventually any purpose gets expressed through some activity, through some manifestation of it in reality. And commerce is in that sense a legitimate business, a human activity. So to think of commerce, it's one thing to arrogate all that to commerce, but then to say that commerce can have no sort of a role in any kind of a human endeavor, I think would be to overstate the case on the other side. So I certainly think it is possible, but it is difficult.
Okay, I'm going to take the last question now, and I think it's for Santosh again. Given a choice, would you eliminate brand purpose altogether? Because some brands are misusing it opportunistically. So would you rather have no brand purpose at all?
See, meaning these are English words. This brand and this purpose. So much there is nobody in the world who can sort of eliminate these ideas, right? The problem is, I don't think it's a question of eliminating them. I think it's simply a question of being skeptical, being circumspect, being cautious, and being realistic. And actually, so therefore, is in a fundamental sense, is it wrong for business to be more cognizant of society, to have greater social concerns? Absolutely not. Business must. But it is a process. It is a process, and if they follow the process, then I absolutely think ideas of all kinds, including brand purpose, have their place, but not in the way in which it is being practiced today. I think it creates problems rather than solutions.
Okay, so I think our time's up. That brings us to the vote of thanks. I'd like to thank both of you to actually come on stage and come online and speak about this, because I've long felt, like I said before at the beginning of this debate, that what we need in this industry and in this country is the art of disagreement. And that I think helps, because once again, something I've always said, all good things are born out of conflict. So Santosh and Jyoti, thanks a lot for me, a stimulating debate. And for once, I was glad to be moderator and not on either side. I have to just announce that this show will be aired on ET now. So all those of you who know people who missed it and would like to watch it, watch out for a future date when the show is aired on ET now. So it's Advertising Club's Vice and Versa, Session 1, Brand Purpose opportunistic or responsible. Coming soon on ET now. So thanks a lot, Santosh. Thanks a lot, Josy. Like we said in our communication prior to the program, there are no winners, there are no losers, there are only gainers. And I think a lot of people have gained a lot from this, at least I have. Thanks a lot.
Santosh, I still love you, man. Aggie. So,
Thanks. I think we have to wait till they tell us to go.